Stop dumping onion skins under your tomatoes. If your tomato plants are flowering with no fruit, dropping blossoms, and covered in aphids, you're standing right at the double failure point. And the fertilizer you're about to buy is going to make it worse. In the next 12 minutes, I'll show you the 3-step kitchen scrap trick that fixes both problems for $0. There's a reason 90% of gardeners ruin this hack, and it has nothing to do with the onion itself. A University of Florida trial found that one wrong move cuts your tomato roots by 72% in just 10 days. I'll show you the exact mistake, plus the 3 numbers that keep your plants alive, around the 10-minute mark. Stay with me. Here's how the next 12 minutes break down. 3 parts. Stick with me to the end because the mistake is the part nobody talks about. Part 1. The double failure point. Why your high-potassium fertilizer is the actual cause of blossom end rot, not the fix. And why every pest spray fails at the exact moment your tomatoes start to flower. Part 2. The chemistry. 1 dried onion skin running. 2 completely independent jobs at the same time. Calcium and potassium feeding the fruit. Sulfur compounds masking the scent from aphids. Part 3. The 3-step playbook and the one mistake that turns this from a free supercharger into a 72% root disaster. 3 numbers. Memorize them. Here's what's happening on your tomato plant right now. Flowering and fruit set is the most sensitive window in the entire life of that plant. Calcium demand spikes for the cell walls of every new fruit. At the same time, the flowers release a scent that pulls aphids and whiteflies in from across the yard. The nutrition system and the defense system, both about to break at the same moment. That's the double failure point. Now here's the part most gardeners get wrong. When you see the fruit failing, you grab the high-potassium fertilizer off the shelf. You spend $30 to $50 a season on it. And it's actually making the rot worse. Potassium and calcium are not friends at the root. They compete for the exact same channels in the root membrane. Potassium is a small, fast ion. Calcium is heavier and slower. When you flood the soil with potassium, it blocks calcium from getting in. The fruit walls don't get the calcium they need. The bottom of the tomato collapses. That dark, sunken patch you're seeing is blossom end rot. And the fertilizer you bought to fix it is the thing causing it. The pest spray story is just as bad. Whiteflies don't sit still on a leaf waiting to get coated. They live in the air pocket around the canopy. A surface spray hits maybe 20% of them. The other thing it does hit every single time is your predator bugs. The ladybugs and lacewings that eat aphids for free. Kill them, and the aphid population often rebounds within weeks. That's $70 a season for a problem that keeps getting worse. 3 symptoms show up together. Watch for them. Black sunken patches on the bottom of young fruit. Yellowing flower stems that drop before the bee even shows up. And the older leaves scorching at the edges while the new ones curl. If you see 2 of those 3 on the same plant, you're at the double failure point. One of my subscribers in Texas messaged me last summer. He'd been pouring high-potassium feed on his beefsteak tomatoes for 3 years in a row. Every season, the rot got worse. Last summer, he gave up on the fertilizer for 1 bed. The rot stopped on its own. Same soil, same seedlings. Just 1 variable removed. Now, I know what you're thinking. Doesn't potassium make tomatoes sweeter? Yes, it does, but only when calcium is already there to build the wall around the sugar. If the ratio is off, you get sweet liquid behind a broken wall. That's not a tomato. That's a rotten one. So what cools both fires at once? The answer is sitting in your trash bin tonight. Pull a dried onion skin out of your trash. The papery outer layer of 3 average onions weighs about 15 to 20 grams. That's your supercharger. Here's why this works on the fruit. The skin is packed with calcium and potassium in a very specific form. The calcium is locked inside tiny crystals called calcium oxalate. Soil bacteria slowly chew through those crystals over a few weeks. The calcium drips out slow and steady. No spike, no saltburn. It arrives at the root exactly when the fruit is asking for it. And there's real data on this. A peer-reviewed analysis in Scientific Reports measured onion skin powder at roughly 39,000 milligrams of calcium per gram dry weight. The same skins held over 4,000 milligrams of potassium. Penn State Extension says the single biggest fix for blossom end rot is a steady supply of calcium to the fruit. A buried onion skin is basically a slow drip of exactly that, sitting 5 centimeters from the root. Now for the second job. Same skin, different chemistry. When the skin cells crack open in moist soil, an enzyme called alliinase wakes up. It converts the sulfur compounds in the skin into something called thiosulfonate. That's the same family of molecules that makes you cry when you cut a fresh onion. Thiosulfonate does 3 things in the air around your tomato. 1. It covers up the scent the plant uses to attract its own pollinators, so aphids and whiteflies have a harder time locating the leaves. Now, if that's already saving you $70 a season, hold on. The next 5 minutes are the part nobody talks about. 3 numbers, 1 mistake. And a University of Florida study that explains why 90% of gardeners turn this trick into a disaster. Here's the playbook for 1 mature tomato plant, or any plant in a 5-gallon container. You do this 1 time at the start of the flowering window. Not weekly, not every time you water. 1 time. That part is non-negotiable. Step 1. Dry. Grab 15 to 20 grams of skin. That's the papery outer layer of about 3 big onions. Use a kitchen scale the first time so you can eyeball it from then on. Now look at the skin. If you see black powder or fuzzy spots, that's black mold. Toss it and start over. You don't want that anywhere near the roots. Step 2. Bury. Dig a small hole 5 centimeters from the main stem. Not closer, not against the stem. The depth is also 5 centimeters. Drop the skins in, cover with soil. 5 and 5. Far enough that the skin isn't crowding the root crown. Close enough that the sulfur compounds reach the canopy when the soil warms up. Step 3. Water timing. Soak the bed right after burying. That kickstarts the bacteria that release the calcium. Then keep the soil evenly moist for the next 2 weeks. Not soggy, not bone dry. Even moisture is what carries calcium to the fruit. The dry-wet-dry cycle is the single biggest cause of blossom end rot, with or without onion skins. Now here's the mistake. Most gardeners hear free fertilizer and dump a whole bowl of onion skins right against the stem. Don't. Researchers at the University of Florida tested concentrated onion compounds on tomato roots in 2021. The result was brutal. Tomato root hair density dropped 72% in just 10 days. 72%. The plant couldn't drink water anymore. Couldn't pull nutrients. Stunted, yellow, miserable. Same chemistry that helps in small doses wrecks the roots in large ones. The botanical name is allelopathic root suppression. The plain English name is too much of a good thing. One safety note before we close. Onion plants are in the allium family. Allium is genuinely toxic to dogs and cats if they eat the raw skin or bulb. Burying the skin 5 centimeters down and covering with soil keeps it out of reach. If your dog likes to dig in your beds, lay a small rock over the spot. Done. Kids are fine. The compounds break down in the soil within a few weeks. I know what some of you are thinking. Just 1 handful per plant? That seems like nothing. That's exactly the point. The whole story of this trick is that 15 grams in the right spot beats 100 grams in the wrong spot every single time. More is not better. Right is better. So, 3 numbers. 15 to 20 grams. 5 centimeters from the stem. 1 time per flowering window. Memorize those 3. Sleep on those 3. Those 3 numbers are the difference between a sweet harvest and the brown root mess. Let me close this the way I'd say it to a neighbor over the fence. The flowering window on a tomato is a double failure point. Bigger fertilizer makes the rot worse. Spray makes the aphids worse. Both expensive, both working against you. 1 dried onion skin solves both. Slow-release calcium and potassium for the fruit, sulfur compounds in the air to discourage pests. Same skin, 2 jobs, $0. 3 numbers. 15 to 20 grams. 5 centimeters from the stem. 1 time per flowering window. Get those right, and that 72% root collapse goes from a real threat to a thing you simply avoid. And the answer to the question I asked at the start. 90% of gardeners ruin this hack because they guess the amount. They think more is better. You know better now. You're not in that 90% anymore. Here's what I want you to do. Save this video. Don't like and run, save it. In 2 or 3 weeks, when you're standing over a flowering tomato, wondering if it was 15 grams or 50, you're going to need those 3 numbers in your pocket. Try it on 1 test plant this week. The first time your neighbor leans over the fence and asks why your tomatoes have no rot, you'll know the story is worth telling. Happy gardening!